you looking to grow revenues, increase profitability, or obtain financing? If so, you came to the right place.
Running a business is all about leadership. How do you become a better leader? Learn from the successful entrepreneurs and business owners how to lead your organization more effectively. That's why we created Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business, to help you succeed with your host, Andrew Frazier, Business Growth Pro and CFO and founder of the Small Business Pro University. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, we're joined by experienced entrepreneurs and business owners who share their secrets to success via live stream. Also, every Friday morning, we release a new podcast episode. Either way, you will learn about developing your business leadership skills from our roster of highly performing guest experts. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbprou.com.
Good evening and welcome to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. I'm Andrew Frazier, your host, and excited to be back here once again on Tuesday evening, Talking Small Business. As you may know, to be successful as a business owner, one of the most important things is your leadership skills. So that's what this live stream is all about, talking about how you can be a better leader, bringing in successful, established leaders and thought leaders in different areas to share their expertise with you. And very excited once again this evening. Hey, Anita, how's everything going? Welcome everybody to the show. And as always, feel free to post comments, ask questions. We'd be glad to address them. And let's get it ready to get started. Definitely tonight's guest is Andrew Botwin. He's got a lot of tremendous experience in the leadership area, as well as we're going to talk a little bit about your culture, because your culture really drives the success of your business. So, when we're talking about your culture, what does that mean? What does that really mean? That's one thing we're going to talk about. And how do you create a culture that's high performing? This is Andrew here. This is Andrew here, how to create a high performing culture. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Andrew on. Hey, Andrew, how's it going tonight?
I'm well. How are you doing today, Andrew?
Excellent. It's been a good day. I appreciate you taking time to hang out with me tonight and talk small business.
Yeah, always happy to, and I appreciate it. Right back at you.
Okay, excellent. So now I know, now that we're past Labor Day, everything's in accelerated mode. A lot of things are speeding up. Everybody's getting ready to try and make their goals for the end of the year. And it's kind of exciting time, so, I know that, a lot of things are going on my end. How about on your end?
Yeah, I'd say the same. Interestingly, I'd say I'd add to exciting a little scary in terms of a lot of what I'm hearing from a lot of different businesses, large and small. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We're in an interesting time right now.
Yeah, definitely a lot of uncertainty, and definitely it can be scary as well. So especially depending on how prepared you are for what may happen. So, and we don't know what's going to happen, so we don't know whether we're prepared or not.
You know what? I mean, you never know exactly what's going to happen. I guess that's the beauty of, I think, part of what we're going to talk about today. Because leadership can be the foundation in a lot of ways to stability in difficult times and to really help fuel in high growth times.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation this evening. But before we get started, I just want you to take a little bit of time to share your journey, how you got to where you are now, some of the key things that you learned in the process, and then we'll pick up from there. Fair enough?
Sure. How much time do I have on that?
Take like 3 to 5 minutes. It's cool.
Okay. Education, I'll start there. I have an undergraduate degree in accounting from Villanova University, an MBA with a concentration in human resources management from Fairleigh Dickinson University, and have a Juris Doctorate from Rutgers School of Law in Newark. I have lots of different certifications that ultimately led to the specializations that I have today. My career started, my plan was to go to law school, going from high school to college. So I was pre-law, even though that's not really a major. And, along the way, I started getting a little bit aggressive in college career fairs early on. I would just be curious and go to some of those career fairs. And I got linked up with Arthur Andersen, who at the time was considered by many the premier accounting firm in the world, and wound up getting a job offer. So I decided to take it and put off law school indefinitely. And I went there for a little under 2 years. And, there were some things I liked about the experience, but it really wasn't for me at the time. And I had a very good close contact for an extremely large staffing and payrolling company. And people always said I was good with people and I should get into human resources. I'm sure anybody out there that is in HR may have heard that kind of language before. So I did it. I went to work for them and had a lot of success. I had a lot of movement inside that organization over a 5-year period. Everything from branch temporary recruiting, people into clerical positions, light industrial positions, some more sophisticated positions, and wound up developing a relationship that pulled me on site to a Fortune 500 company at the time called Casio. Had a great run there, but was looking for more and moved internally in that same organization to some national roles that involved both high scale and high volume recruiting to risk management issues. So this was in the 90s when PEOs were really starting to get some notoriety and steam. So was at the ground level of creating some PEOs, professional employment organizations. It was during that time that I got my MBA at night in the evenings. And after about 5 years, I was getting bored. I was looking at the clock. And, every day after lunch, when you start looking at the clock a lot, between then and the time you're ready to go home, I woke up one day and said, this wasn't for me, and wound up back in the accounting space. This time on the human capital side, I was an HR manager for a good size, rapidly growing accounting firm based in New Jersey with an office in New York. And wound up spending 12 years there, where they grew to having offices all over the country. During that time, I went back to school at night again, just because I was a glutton for punishment, maybe, and went and graduated law school while I was there. During that time, that accounting firm had a divestiture. So they were about 1,000 people and had an event that basically separated the firm into two. The surviving accounting firm retained me. A couple years later, I was promoted to partner, even though I was on the human resources side, and was there for about a dozen years. And when I was leaving, they were about to be named to Fortune magazine's 100 Best Places to Work list. So the topic of culture is very near and dear to my heart. Living through some of the experiences to try to move an organization in that direction was a tremendous learning experience. At times, looking at myself right now on camera and realizing I still have a full head of hair, but I might not have thought I would through some of that. But it was very rewarding, and to really see the mutual impact that can have on not only the experience of people in the organization, but to the financial success of the business was really tremendous. And that inspired me to start my own business. And that was about a decade ago. And that's the first of two companies that I own. So the first that I started about 10 years ago is a consulting firm focused primarily on leadership development, so mostly executive coaching, one-on-one with people in leadership roles. And the other area of the practice is very niche around harassment and discrimination issues in the workplace, both as neutral third-party investigations and training in for groups of people, whether it's in person or certainly in the last couple of years, virtually live training. Sometimes I get called in for specialized training if somebody was found to have done something wrong, for sort of a one-on-one corrective action training. And so that whole business is really inspired from and around culture. And the second business started about 4 years ago. It's actually a partnership where we created a technology company to deliver harassment and discrimination training around the country. Different versions for different states. Each state that passes laws has different requirements. And so we focus on developing a high quality training that can be delivered on demand in an interactive way to companies, regardless of where they are in the United States. And that extends to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. So I'll take a pause and happy to answer any questions. Hopefully that was thorough enough.
Okay, no, excellent. So you had an interesting journey going from accounting to HR to accounting to HR. So I guess definitely you're in the space where you gravitated towards, which is key. One thing you said is you worked at a PEO, and that's an option for small business owners. I've worked with some small business owners that, have a PEO, but most people don't know what a PEO is. So if you take a little bit of time to just explain what a PEO is and how it could be beneficial to an entrepreneur or a small business owner.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I was sort of the right-hand person to kind of an upstart section of a company that was actually developing PEOs, pretty large, very experienced payrolling and staffing company. But PEOs are different, and at a very simple, high level. So again, PEOs stand for Professional Employment Organizations. The way I would describe it to somebody that isn't familiar is picture a joint or shared employment arrangement. So these organizations, these PEOs, share the employment responsibility with the company where people are working. But through that shared employment arrangement, companies may enter this for lots of reasons. Small companies to get access to maybe what might be benefits in a pooled set of resources that they might not otherwise be able to get access to. Same thing with various insurances, but lots of risk components as well. Sometimes PEOs can offer a version of an outsourced human resources benefit. So the small employers, those 1, 5, 10, 20 people, employers typically don't have the resources to bring in a full-time human resources person. And so PEOs are, as you emphasize, one option. There's lots of options out there, but they're one that can really help be a resource to help organizations, from everything from payroll to insurances to compliance and those type of things.
Okay. All right. Great. So definitely it can take care of a lot of services that you're going to need for employees without you having to do it. That's kind of cool that you were on the ground floor of that. And
it was pretty neat. Ultimately that company wasn't highly successful.
Mm-hmm.
They had gained some groundswell, but the 90s was a little bit of a wild west in that space. The regulatory environment around that was a little bit different. There's PEOs that are thriving today that were around then, but a lot have come and gone. And sort of the concept that I tried to explain still survives today, and it's very similar, although it does look and feel a little bit different than it did back then. But you're right; it was a tremendous experience for a relatively young person in his career.
Okay, great. So, we do this live stream and the podcast through my Small Business Pro University. So we're just going to take a minute to learn a little bit more about the university, and then we're going to come back with Andy talking small business. Do you own your business, or does it own you? Is your business growing, and are you making enough money? As a business owner, there are so many things you need to know to become more successful. Hello, my name is Andrew Frazier, the Business Growth Pro and CFO. I created the Small Business Pro University for you. Small Business Pro University has self-paced, dynamic, multimedia learning experiences created by more than 20 instructors who are business owners just like you. Small Business Pro University will empower you to become a masterpreneur by learning the secrets to creating a successful enterprise, to go from working in your business to working on your business. Take advantage of our strategic coaching program, or just simply choose the courses that you need. At www.sbprou.com, we will empower you to thrive and not just survive, and make more money in any business environment. Welcome back to Leadership Live at 8:05. I'm here with Andy Botwin, and we're talking small business. So Andy, having spent time in HR and, having an understanding of it, a lot of times within organizations and, in small businesses, people don't really value or understand the value of HR. So, definitely some organizations that do understand the value are really able to allow it to make a big difference in your company. But, why is that, and what do people need to know so that they can really value what HR can bring to the table for their company?
Okay, that was a big question with, I think, a couple different nuances layered into there. So I'll try to unpack that a little bit. I think what I heard is, why is it that companies don't necessarily understand or value HR, and what can HR do for an organization? Did I have those right?
Yeah, I think that's more or less. So yeah.
All right. Well, if I'm missing something that you're curious about, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just go with it. To start, value of HR in companies, having spent 30-ish years in and around that space, I probably am not completely objective when I say, HR can add tremendous value to an organization, and having those resources in some form is a must-have, regardless of the size of your organization. So, some people think HR is purely administrative, and it can be, but that can be a mistake, especially for small employers. Part of what I do, I mentioned, is specialized training in companies. I recently got hired to do a live in-person training for a 6-person company. Now the cost to go to an employer's site for a few hours is more money than an employer might typically anticipate spending just for sexual harassment and discrimination training. And the reason why that happened wasn't because that organization said this would be a really great idea and we value this kind of training. It was more in a reactive issue, and it was part of a settlement agreement with a state government agency, because an employee filed a suit against them, and they made some mistakes. And the business owner was talking to me saying, as small business owners, we get screwed because we're expected, and that was literally their word. I hope that's okay that I used that word. But, they felt that they really had an unfair advantage and a challenge because they're such a small company, yet they're held to compliance standards, legal standards, certain types of behaviors and certain ways to handle certain situations, that unless you're familiar with those laws or you focus on that, and the typical business owner is focusing on their products or services, whatever it is that they're trying to build and do for a living, not necessarily learning and understanding, some of the many different elements that you need to be aware of. Some people think, hiring somebody is a matter of filling out forms, if you even know the right forms that you're supposed to have filled out. But there can be a lot more to it than that. And that varies from state to state. That varies sometimes from city to city. And then there's a lot that you need to know from a compliance standpoint. And there's an art to a lot of what you do, even when it comes to things like developing benefits. Now, smaller employers have fewer options, so it's a little less complicated, but still can be complicated and confusing to people that don't really focus on that.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, as a small business employer, to use your word, you can get screwed in a lot of ways because you're expected to know so many things, but it's only you, and you only have the ability to learn so much, and that's one of the reasons we do this, so that you can be have a greater perspective and understanding. And like you said, HR can be administrative. A lot of times when people think of HR, it's on the negative side when something negative happens. But using developing your human resources is key to being able to have operational excellence and maximize the impact of your business. And a lot of times that's done through the culture, which is your most important job as a business owner. One of your most important jobs as your business is growing. First job is selling market so you can stay in business. But once you've got that down, you got to focus on your culture. So, Andy, what is culture and why is it important?
Culture has so many different meanings, but if I were to try to simplify it for right now, and we can expand in any direction that you want, it's simply the way that your company operates, how you treat people, both internally and externally, and recognizing and being, I would say, being deliberate. I think a lot of companies, every organization has a culture, whether it's that business of one or just a few handful of people. You have a culture. The way that you talk to each other, the way that you engage each other, the expectations that you have. Do people respond to emails within 15 minutes or within 2 days? That all of those things kind of define the culture. But it's really the way that people experience you and the organization and each other within the organization.
Okay, so it's kind of like how we do things here.
In a lot of ways. I mean, I think what I would slightly pick apart there in the how we do things, culture isn't necessarily just, operationally. And I think sometimes people look at process and try to define culture in process and how they're going about whatever it is that is their business. It could be, things like, when you walk down the hall, do people say hello, or do they, kind of, just walk by each other as quickly as possible? That kind of thing can be part of it as well.
Okay. So now, how does your company get a culture? How does culture come to be?
So culture just is, whether you focus on it or not, it will happen. And, from day one to day, 100 to day 1,000, you'll have culture. I think what oftentimes happens, though, is culture just evolves without any real focus. And as companies grow, the bigger you get, what organizations sometimes find is that they can make their businesses stronger by focusing on culture. And I'd argue if most of your audience is very small business owners, the time to focus on it is now, because if you can set that up when you're small, as you grow, it'll be easier to reap the advantages of that. And it will also give you some guiding posts in terms of how you operate, how you grow, how to deal with difficult decisions and that kind of thing.
All right. So no, that's key. You mentioned that, you want to work on your culture now. So as a business owner, can you just create the culture that you want, or how does it work?
So you can influence the culture. If you're a company of 5 people, as the owner, there's certainly a top-down element. How you act, how you treat people, how you show up every day will influence how other people, show up and act. For example, if you yell at people, then yelling might be accepted in your culture. If you talk differently to people, talking differently to people, whatever that might look like, may be accepted in that culture. So there's no doubt the person at the top of the food chain, the CEO, the owner, has tremendous influence. I don't know that they alone create it, because each of those other 4 participants in this fictitious company of 5, each have influence, and each are showing up, and every action, inaction, and ways that people go about their days impacts the culture, where leadership becomes so fundamental and important. And what you can, I would soften up the word create, but significantly influence and be deliberate about, is by communicating what your vision is, what your negotiables are, what your non-negotiables are. A lot of times it comes down to certain types of behaviors. We act this way, we don't act that way. And, and drawing sort of some lines in the sand in terms of certain types of behavior.
Okay. So no, it's good that you said sort of influence. So basically you can't just say, I want this culture, and it becomes this culture. You've got to work at it, but it's not really in your hands totally.
Yeah. I mean, I want to make $1 million on, Wednesday, tomorrow. As much as I work on it, that might not quite happen, but, I know for sure, more likely than not, I'm going to have to work towards getting there. And I can influence that, but there's other variables that will come into play.
Mm-hmm.
I often talk to people, so when culture is discussed, and, even at, some big consulting companies, they talk about things like, here's our playbook. Here's what we're going to come in and do for you. So big companies with big budgets hire big companies, big consulting companies with lots of resources. And I actually think that's one of the biggest mistakes companies can make. Certainly throwing resources at these types of organizational development efforts can help. But it's not a one size fits all. What might work for Andrew Frazier's company might not work for Andy Botwin's company. And, some people, I think, in their minds say, okay, culture, this is what a good culture is. I'm not so sure that I think that's too quick of a draw on a statement. Culture is, can be different in 2 different organizations and be wildly successful. What I always talk to leaders about is being deliberate and being intentional, and spending the time to focus on who it is that you want to be, what kind of organization that you want to be, figure out how and what some of the behaviors are that will lead you towards that direction from a strategic standpoint, and implement them, execute on them, and enforce them.
Okay, excellent. So, one thing that I think of when I think of you can only influence it is your brand. In your brand, your brand is you, but it's what people say about you when you're not in the room. So, you can do things to hopefully get them to say and think what you want them to think about you. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen. And, you can do things to hurt your brand, especially if you're not consistent and aligned, which is similar to what happens on the cultural side. So now, what's the benefit of having a strong culture, and what's the downside of having a weak culture?
So that's a big question. I'll try to simplify that in a kind of a fundamental short response. And again, if you want to expand, we can. But a strong culture, I think, will set expectations. So when you're hiring somebody, for example, you can interview somebody, you can interview them once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. You still don't know that person, that well. You're taking an educated risk after an interview, as are they, when they choose to accept a position with you. And so, there's finding that fit, but a good culture will help not only the person making the decision on the hiring, but the person joining to know, are they going to be a good fit together? So, from the very outset of bringing on employees, it can help you make better hiring decisions or avoid worse hiring decisions, just by knowing who you are, knowing what your culture is. And if it's really embedded in who you are, invariably it'll be part of the conversation, when you're talking to prospective hires. And that translates, to every day, everything that you do. The way that you conduct yourself, the way that you go to problem solving, the way that, you engage people on issues that they're having. A weak culture, again, I would sort of reframe that from, weak to, let's say, less intentional or less deliberate culture. Could be the opposite of, you used a great word around branding that resonated with me about consistency. And so, an undeliberate or unthought out and not executed on culture can create inconsistency. And while certainly, they say variety is the spice of life, and most people don't want the same exact replay and Groundhog's Day of every day in work, but they do want to know where they stand, how they stand. Imagine, at a simple level, and most people have experienced people like this in life. One day, I need to wait until this person's in a good mood. They're in a good mood half a day and a bad mood, and the other half of the time. And if they're in a good mood, they're going to react one way. If they're in a bad mood, they're going to react in another way. I mean, just think about that on a simplistic level. That inconsistency will change the efficiency of your organization. If a decision needs to be made and people are holding off to find you in the right mood, in that oversimplistic example, that's a delay. That's an inefficiency created in your organization. And that just compounds minute by minute, really.
Okay, so like the inconsistencies, like breed confusion, I guess, and hesitancy within the organization, and it makes it harder for you to operate, at full capability. I think
and disruption. So take our same hypothetical group of 5 employees. If you're inconsistent or erratic as a leader, and the culture isn't really defined on how to handle those types of situations, you'd be a fool to not think that some portion, either 2, 3, or all 4 of the other people at times aren't spending their time at work talking about, oh, is now a good time to get, Andy, or is now a bad time? When should we do this? What kind of mood? I mean, that's a waste of time. That's negative energy. It hurts your brand, as you called it. But it's not helpful to the business or the people in the business or their experience and how they go home at night.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think that, one thing that is key is that every single person who comes into your company, especially when you're smaller, changes the culture somewhat. And so when you're looking at hiring, it's really important to sort of make sure you're hiring the right people and fit into your culture.
Yeah, and it's that change. Culture is a living, breathing concept, and so that new person, every person that you hire, as you said, does add an element of change, and that could be a good thing. All the research suggests on many different levels that diversity of thought and opinions typically lead to better, stronger organizations. So being breathable and able to evolve is a good, healthy thing. However, I'd argue that most deliberate cultures will have very strong tenets that set guideposts in terms of, how much, how much change will the company absorb. For example, there's rules. Do we follow the rules to the letter, or will we bend them, or will we cross the line? Will we do unethical things? Each one of those decisions, is typically predicated based on the culture of the organization.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, I've once heard that your culture tends to be resonate with the worst thing that you will allow to happen within your company, or the worst behavior, or something like that.
I don't know that I heard that, but I think it's resonating with me. It's kind of like you're only as good as your weakest link, and maybe where there's holes or acceptance of different behaviors that are contrary to your culture. Those, in some ways, can be the Achilles heel and the weakest link of a business.
Okay, cool. And one of the things also is, I guess, if you have a strong culture, one of the things it does, it can attract the people that you want and sort of repel the people that you don't want at some level. How is that, and why might that happen?
I can't understate the value that most organizations might not realize is there. So, using my live experience, the organization that I mentioned that I was with for many years, we received national, accommodations and notoriety for some of what we achieved. Because we were evaluated to have done some progressive things by independent companies. However, what happened, and culture is a tough thing, especially as you grow. You get people that have opinions. We all have opinions as people, and we all have different opinions, and multiple opinions can be right. And it's aligning those opinions. And what we found, that the more we were able to be intentional, the more we were able to have success at defining and creating and living a certain type of behavior, a certain type of culture. Even in difficult recruiting cycles, we had an easier time recruiting. Not that it was always easy, but the reality is when people have choices and places that they can, between one employer over another, they're going to choose the one that they've heard good things about. When you have people willing to refer relatives, friends, colleagues that they respect, that's meaningful, and not just for an incentive because you've given them some type of financial incentive if they refer somebody. There is the level of engagement that people have. And in today's world, with social media, it's very common when people are looking for jobs, they may look at things like Glassdoor and other social media forums to try to learn about the company and what people have to say. And, that could influence whether they even apply to your company. But there's no doubt that if you can get groundswell in whatever local areas that you operate in, that say that this is a great place to work, that will make a difference, for some of the people that you hire and attract some people.
Okay, cool. So, I worked at a company called McMaster Car Supply Company. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them,
I'm not.
but they're one of the largest supply companies in the world, and they compete with Granger. Granger has like a red Cadillac. McMaster has a yellow one,
Okay.
but super well run company, really strong culture. They have 6 locations through the U.S. and they'll ship industrial supplies so you get them the next day at regular UPS rates from only 6 places, and we'd have over 300,000 items in our warehouse. So, we used to be really busy. I think my department ships 6,000 orders a day or something crazy.
Big
But,
number.
when you have something like that, your culture is important. And they were very deliberate about their culture. And one thing I remember they would do is when people would start, they would put them loading the trucks all day. So, that's probably the hardest and worst job you could have. But, if you can make it through that, then they know that you're hardworking and you're committed. And, that sort of helps. And then whoever's not able to make it through that, they generally don't stay at the company. So they sort of self-select. And that was kind of interesting way to do it. But, it did facilitate, them really having people who are committed and who weren't afraid of working hard.
Yeah, there's lots of different interesting methods that people have and organizations have put into play. I think the example I'm about to give you is from Zappos, but it could be another organization. But there's some companies out there that I've seen that will pay people to quit, within a certain period of time, because they really see the value, or more importantly, the cost to the organization by having people that aren't the right fit. And some companies have made it famous, like Zappos, but other companies have had their own variations like that. And interestingly, so I'm not familiar with your company, but in my journey to get the accounting firm that I was with on the Fortune magazine's 100 Best Places to Work, I did come across and get to spend some time with some folks at Granger as they were going through their own journey, to try to improve their culture.
Okay. All right. And, it's one thing to say you want a culture and do some things, but a big thing is also rewarding the right behaviors. And what are some ways, there's a lot of ways to reward things. What could be some good ways to sort of reward the right behaviors and encourage?
Yeah, I'm going to stick another R word in there, and I think it's reinforcement is more important than the actual reward in terms of behaviors. But it's not only rewarding and reinforcing behaviors, but it's also having a level of accountability and not accepting the opposite of those behaviors. So if somebody says, we tie our shoes, at work, and somebody doesn't tie their shoes, is that acceptable, or is it just become a joke? And saying so-and-so doesn't tie their shoes. That's obviously a silly example, but sort of a simple one off the top of my head that I can come up with. I think certainly if I think about the companies that have gained the most attention for their success around developing good workplace cultures, you can pick up, the annual Fortune magazine publication and read, or go online, I guess, today, but and read, what these companies are doing. But what's interesting is a lot of those stories really talk about the things that I would argue why they matter less. Oh, this company has a ping pong table in the office so people can blow off steam and, develop a relationship in a more casual way. that could be very important, that could be powerful, but it doesn't change or overtake the importance of focusing on the behaviors that are important to you, important to the organization, and making sure that you're reinforcing them. Sometimes it can be about money, gift cards. Other times it can be just about, the personalized thank you, the note on the desk, that kind of thing.
Oh, I liked the tying shoes example.
Good. I wasn't sure if I liked it, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. So just to build on that, like, if your culture is well ingrained, if someone doesn't have their shoes tied, it's not just like the owner would need to tell them. Basically, everyone in the organization usually would know that that was an issue, and they, so you would it would be reinforced by everybody in the organization. And
you know what? Really perceptive, Andrew, and I'm gonna jump on and add to what you're saying. Is and that is a deliberate culture that an organization might want to make. Is it a rule, and does everybody sort of watch and say, Andrew didn't tie his shoes? I mean, you're nicer dressed than me, so we'll call it Andy didn't tie his shoes, and we'll assume that you did. So, but are people just going to watch and wait for Andy to get corrected or get told that he has to tie his shoes, or will they help each other out and say, look, this is the way we roll here is we all tie our shoes. You better do it, otherwise, you might get in trouble, but because it's not accepted, it's just not the way that we do things here.
Yeah, and that's when you can tell you have a strong culture. And that's what you want to build. I think, a lot of small business owners sort of feel that they're in the position that they're the only one that reinforces stuff. Like, they want stuff to happen, but it won't happen if they aren't there or make it happen. And how can they deal with that? I know I work with a lot of business owners and sort of try and help them through that. But what do you see as some ways to sort of change the culture from where, you got to be the one making everything happen to, the organization running the way you want it to run without you having to do everything?
Well, you probably unintentionally set me up for a commercial. So if anybody out there is thinking along the lines of what Andrew just said, I'd push back on you and say that's a cop-out. And really what that comes down to is leadership. If nothing happens in your organization that you have other people involved, without you having to pull every string and push every door, then that's a problem and something that you need to focus on to work on yourself as a leader.
And that's a big part of what this show is all about, because a lot of times if you're a business owner, you haven't worked in a larger company, you're not clear on what culture really is or looks like. And when I do coaching and consulting, one of the ways, one of the key things is, you have to think about your culture as a business owner. And then also, like you said, leadership is key. So you got to develop your skills so that you can influence people and build relationships to get them forward. What do you recommend people do to improve their leadership skills?
So, I think the first step is work on your own self-awareness and then your own emotional intelligence. I see a lot of people in business that confuse authority and power with leadership. For example, it's my company. I'm the CEO. I'm the leader. You might be the person in the leadership position, but that doesn't necessarily make you a leader of people. And you need to define what you want that to look like. But if you looked at a Webster's dictionary or something like that, or Wikipedia, I guess today, you'd probably find something along the lines of, a person or group of people that others want to follow. And the reality is, people that work for you, as long as they're working for you, have to listen to you to some degree, so they have to take your direction. But are you going to get that extra little bit of effort from them? Are you going to have them take ownership of something that they don't own? It's those kinds of things. And, when I deal with people in my coaching practice, a lot of times their struggle is, well, there's lots of struggles, but sometimes as a leader, it's getting people to think of the business the way that the leader wants to. And that's complicated, but in a lot of ways, it's really very simple. And it just comes down to focus and mindset. I think one of the adages that is used a lot out there is there's a difference between working in your business and working on your business. I'd sort of say, the first step along the way, though, is work on you before you work on your people, because you'll find that you'll get probably a bigger return, even indirectly through leading your people, if you can work effectively on you.
Okay. No, that's excellent. So definitely working on you. Most times when I'm working with someone, I start with Myers-Briggs assessment, which helps people to, understand how to lead, or understand themselves better and get more of an understanding of emotional intelligence. One other thing I sort of do is I will have them read Myers-Briggs as well. So any type of other learning materials or anything that you recommend?
There's a lot out there. I do use other assessments sometimes, not sort of standard like you do. I think there's different approaches. And depending on the organization, sometimes getting feedback from your people, common term is a 360 of some sort, depending on the size of your organization. But understanding how people are perceiving you, oftentimes we all, as people, I think, have a tendency to have a higher self view of ourselves, or a different lens on ourselves than other people may see. And the more you can get in touch with that and own that, the more effective you can adapt.
Okay. Excellent. And actually what we were talking about reminded me, I did a training on Friday, and one of the topics we covered was leadership. So here's a quick video that I think you'll find interesting on leadership. General Colin Powell. And let's see, let me start it.
Trust. The longer I have been in public service, and the more people have asked me about leadership over the years, leadership ultimately comes down to creating conditions of trust within an organization. Good leaders are people who are trusted by followers. Leaders take organizations past the level that the science of management says is possible. One of my sergeants back in the infantry school at Fort Benning almost 50 years ago, which is where I learned everything I ever got to learn about leadership, was at the infantry school. And he said to me one day, he said, "Lieutenant, you'll know you're a good leader when people follow you, if only out of curiosity." I've never had a better definition. Because what he was saying, and I've seen it experienced in my lifetime. What he was saying is, trust you. And you have built up that trust. How did you do it? Clear mission and statement, selfless service. People look to you and they trust you because you're serving selflessly as the leader, not self-serving, selflessly. And that you prepare the followers, you train them, You give them what they need to get the job done. Don't give them a job if you're not going to give them the resources, and that you're prepared to take the risks with them. And so they would teach us at the infantry school, no matter how cold it is, Lieutenant, you must never look cold. No matter how hungry you all are, Lieutenant, you must never appear hungry. No matter how terrified you are, Lieutenant, you must never look terrified. Because if you are scared, terrified, hungry, and cold, they will be scared, terrified, hungry, and cold. I've gotten away with that many, many times in the course of my career by being scared to death, cold, and wanting to go to sleep. But no, let's go. Let's keep going. Let's go around this corner, if only out of curiosity. And they'll follow you into the darkest night, down the deepest valley, up the highest hill, if they trust you. So the essence of leadership is about doing all that the science of management says you can with resources, but then taking that extra step and giving it that spark. And that spark comes from getting people to trust you so that they will follow you, if only out of curiosity. Thank you.
Okay, so what do you think of that?
Somebody else have a thought?
No, we're good. Can you hearing something else?
Oh, I thought I did for a second. No, I liked it. I agree, and I think most books that you read will incorporate trust into the conversation. I think, listening to him, the military, there are tremendous examples that you can lean on through the military and in our history, not just our history, but world history. What's interesting, though, about the military is, and if you think about the dynamic in the military, it is very, you listen, you follow orders without question. And, that's not the case in private industry. You have to follow orders or you get fired. But it's a little bit different in terms of the consequences, and trust is only part of the equation, in my opinion. But what's most important actually isn't even the attributes that a lot of people, including myself, would generically apply to building culture, being a strong leader. It's about you understanding who you are and who you want to be. And if trust is sort of an attribute that you want to lead with, and it's probably a good one to pick as one of the staples, then you go from there. Because when people try to be something that they're not, just because someone says they should be, people, other people are going to see through it. So when people have to follow General Powell through, around the corner in the dark, or I don't recall exactly what he said there. They did it part because they had to, or it was a court martial, part because they trusted him. But there's other things that probably came into play. And, military, there's life and death, situations. And there's times that military leaders know they're going to send people to their death, when maybe it could be avoided, but that decision is actually strategically better for the majority, and those deaths might lead to less deaths later on, kind of thing. So that's my cuff reaction.
Okay, well, I spent a few years in the military, and there are orders, but I think that you can't just get things done based on orders. And I've seen some great examples of leadership in the military. I've seen some terrible examples of leadership in the military, but it was a great place to sort of see the differences and, get an understanding of, how things influence people. But yeah, definitely, military has a strong culture. And, there are some consequences that you might not have in other places. But to be really successful, and, you have to have an environment of trust. You really, it's just like in business, the better your team trusts each other and the more aligned they are, the more successful your business is going to be, and the better they're going to work together. So we're getting up on the 9 o'clock hour. So an hour always goes fast, but if you got a minute, one thing I'd like to ask is, we always talk about a whole bunch of things during the session, but if you could boil it down and give people 3 key things that they could start working on tomorrow to help improve their business and their leadership capabilities, what might those be? I'll give you a minute to think about it, and we'll do a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back and sort of chat about that. I'm going to do a quick commercial for over the past 10 years, I've been doing Power Breakfast events for entrepreneurs and business owners. And we just had one in end of July, which was really great. And our next one's going to be October 28th. So you'll get more info about it. But just to get a feel for what the Power Breakfast is, I'm just going to show you a quick video, and then we'll come back and Andy will tell us a little bit more about what we should think about doing tomorrow to improve our leadership within the organization. If you are looking to increase revenues, improve profitability, and or obtain financing for your business, you need to check out the Power Breakfast and Small Business Pro conferences. My name is Andrew Frazier. One of the things we're here to do is supercharge your day.
Today's Power Breakfast has really been a phenomenal experience. I think it's exactly what business owners need, some true guidance of people who are genuine and really are leading them in the true direction of business growth and expansion.
The Power Breakfast is so important for the entrepreneurial community because it gives the various business people who come together an opportunity to interact and also do some business.
These events, hosted by Andrew Frazier, President and COO of Small Business Like a Pro, will supercharge your day.
Okay, welcome back. Leadership Live at 8:05. I'm here with Andy Botwin. We've had a great talk about small business and culture and how to improve it and make it work for you and your business. Andy's going to share 3 key takeaways that you can use to really improve and work on developing the culture of your business.
Yeah, so I guess before I give 3, or maybe this will count as the first one, is, this is not an all or nothing. You don't have to start and say, this is it. I've come up with the plan and execute on that plan immediately. I'd say the first thing that you should do is look yourself in the mirror and really do an evaluation on who you are and what you want your business to look like and what you want the people in your business, how you want that to look and feel, how they show up every day. Secondly, as part of that, I think constantly working on yourself is one of the most important things that you can do. Andrew, I really appreciated your reference to when you were in the military, that you said you had opportunities to see a lot of really good leaders and a lot of really bad leaders. And I think if we all give a little bit of thought, we've met a lot of people in various situations, social, professional, sports, etc., that we thought had really good attributes as leaders that we might want to emulate. And we've seen people that have ones that we don't. And so do an evaluation on that and try to figure out what fits you with who you are after you've looked yourself in the mirror. And the third is think about the behaviors that will help get you to where you want to be strategically. It's not just, you don't want to just sit there and say, okay, we're going to tie shoes, going back to our earlier reference. But why? What's the connection to getting you to be more effective in your business goals? And a great way to do that is to, and I'll shamelessly plug what you do, Andrew, and what I do a little bit differently, is get help. Get people that focus on this professionally to help focus you, challenge you, and keep you accountable.
Great. No, definitely those three are key. Getting help, especially for something like that, is critical, because you can't see yourself the way other people see you, and that's what you really need to know. And also, when you're the owner of a company, people don't like to tell you bad news or things that you might not be happy about. So having someone to work with, a lot of times I'll be in meetings with people I'm coaching and their team, and just coach them afterwards about, you can sort of see how people react, and also just different ways they may want to do the influence. So, all right. So number one, you want to evaluate what you want. You need to work on yourself. And then you need to think about the behaviors that go in line with the culture that you want. Does that pretty much sum up the three things that you shared?
I wouldn't limit it to three, but I think that's a good summary of what I said. And if you start with those, you'll be in a good place.
Okay, excellent. So, there's always more to learn, but, you want to start in a good place. And, this is definitely a good place to start. So, Andy, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with me tonight. If you can hang on for a few minutes, let me just close out, and we'll go from there. But
thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Always appreciate feedback from the audience, and we like to create valuable experience. So appreciate your feedback, Leon, and everybody else who's tuned into us tonight, and also those of you who are going to check us out after the fact. So just want to share before we go, each week we have someone who brings another angle and another topic and expertise that can help with our leadership. Next week, I'm excited to have Tim Redmond, CEO of Redmond Growth Consulting, and he's going to talk about how you avoid costly mistakes that even smart people make. As a business owner, we all make mistakes, and just as a person, but hopefully, the mistakes we make aren't that big so that we can stay in business. I remember my dad used to always say, we all make mistakes, doesn't we? So, it's nothing wrong to make mistakes, but you want to be careful about them being too big, and you want to learn from your mistakes. So, thanks for tuning in, and always remember that at the end of the day, the more that you know, the faster your business will grow.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Live at 8:05, Talking Small Business. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Leadership Live is one of the many valuable resources provided through the Small Business Pro University, empowering business owners to learn, profit, and grow. Find out more at sbpro.u.com.